Welcome to What's Next. I'm Ravi Tangri, and what I'm doing every weekday in September is I am bringing you alive on figuring out what's next in terms of moving forward in this world and just getting something ready for us. There we go. And the the key here is when you've got so much change, so much turbulence, how do you figure out what where you go in this crazy world? How do you figure your way forward? Yesterday, I got into the secret of finding those leverage points where you can move forward. The key to really finding out um, how do you find your way through all of this confusion. It's not by trying to control everything. It's by finding those key pressure points where everything shifts. And where I want to take that today is getting into something everyone's talked about now for months, but how the heck do you do it? It's the pivot, the art of the pivot. It's become an incredibly overused word. And this is not just for your business, but for yourself. One of the things people have found that I've noticed through my work, through my coaching, is that the lockdown especially gave people a lot of time on their own, and they were starting to look at their life and what worked and what didn't, and whether or not it fit, and they're realizing, maybe this isn't where I want to be. And for your business, the rules have changed. That it's, you if you counted on customers coming through the door, that may not be as easy. If you counted on certain things for manufacturing, you might not be able to do it the same way, or service delivery. If you needed people to come together, in my industry with meetings, the day they declared the global pandemic on March 9th, every meeting in the world disappeared. So we had to find new ways to move forward. But sometimes what people are doing is they're reacting in all sorts of crazy ways. They're finding, they're just saying, what do I do? I can do anything. And there's a lot of fear that comes in, and you just jump to doing something else. Pivoting does not mean just go do something else and in some sort of desperation. And what I want to get into is how you can pivot strategically today. Now, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, if you've got thoughts, you can put them into the the comments there. If you've got insights, ahas, challenges, whether you're live or later on, I will. If it's live, I can bring it into the conversation now. If it's later on, I'll be following these so I can respond in the comments as well. So just to let you know that is there. Plus, there's a couple of things I'm going to let you know at the end, resources for you to be able to move forward in these times as we start moving back. So what does it mean to pivot? The interesting thing is, for me, I've been doing strategic planning for organizations for nearly 30 years. And what's really interesting is the common thread for most of my work is not just standard strategic planning. The irony is most organizations don't do strategic planning when things are going smoothly. It's when all the caca has hit the fan, and they're going, oh my God, how do we find our way through? It could be regulatory changes, it could be competitive changes, technological changes, whatever. But something has happened that's changed the rules. So my approach to most of my strategic planning is is about innovation. It is about pivoting. I've been doing it with organizations for 30 years. It's just that now, instead of organizations hitting it at different times, everyone is finding that they have to innovate. And there's a couple of keys to creating an innovative strategy, and pivoting has to be strategic if you want it sustainable, if you want it moving forward profitably for you. And for yourself, if you want to pivot and change your life, you really do need to be strategic. So you're not just making some knee jerk midlife reactions to what's happening, and you're doing what really works for you at the core. So, what is it that you do? Well, just to let you know, when I do innovation, one of the things that I do, whether I'm working with individuals or I'm working with corporations, is the process I created is called Genesis, and it's based on the creative strategy of Walt Disney, the man. Okay, he didn't know he did it; it was just an intuitive strategy. And there's a couple of key things. There's three modes of thinking that he had, and that are very different. One was Disney the dreamer. He said, "Oh my God, what if we do this? What if we do this? All these crazy, wacky, what you call it, ideas." Another was Disney the designer, who says, "Okay, how do we make that work? That crazy, wacky idea. How could we actually operationalize it?" And then the detailer about how do we, what is it that works, what doesn't work, the critic, the nitpicker. And when I say it like that, we can all do all three of those things, right? We may be stronger in one than another, but we can all do all three. What Disney did that was totally unique is he kept those separate. So when he was a dreamer, he was a pure dreamer about what's the craziest, wackiest idea of dealing with this. Don't worry about practicality. When he was a designer, he got totally practical. When he was a detailer, he nitpicked everything to death. But he kept those separate. Today they'd medicate him. Back then he was a genius. And the other thing is that critical feedback, the detailer, what he did is, everyone talks about constructive criticism. How do you do it? Everyone says it's important, but how do you do it? Well, the art of constructive criticism, let me ask you, when someone comes up with a wacky, crazy idea, how often do you focus on all the good things about it? Never. You just come up with why it's not going to work, right? The art of the effective constructive criticism is when you've got a crazy new idea that your designer has built. First, you list all the pluses. What is it you like? What is it that's working? Then all the cons or the negatives. What you do is you flip them around into what I call how-tos, or how could you. So instead of saying, we can't afford it, how could we make it affordable? Instead of saying, Joe will never buy into it, how could Joe buy into it? And tell me, is it semantics or not? But is there a difference between, we can't afford it versus how could we make it affordable? There's a big difference, right? Instead of shooting it down, you're turning it into a problem-solving challenge, which you then hand back to the designer to address and refine the plan. So that's the approach. But the other critical thing is to invest time to dream. And that's something, when things are changing rapidly and you're stressed, a lot of organizations say, we don't have time to dream. I don't know. And most people I've seen, that's the feedback I've gotten when I've worked with companies and individuals, is they say, we got, other people blue sky, but then what they do is they throw it away and let's get practical with a strategy. I don't. I take that blue sky. That's where the innovation comes from. That's where the breakthroughs come from, where you get, instead of 2 or 3% at the margin improvement, you get tens or hundreds of percent improvement. And find those ideas that have energy and move them forward. Okay. Now, another concept here in the pivot, you may have heard of this, is something called, it's a Japanese concept called ikigai. And what this is, it's an overlap of 4 different things. It's what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what it will pay for. Okay, and as this diagram says, there's different areas of overlap. There are different things, but the ideal is at the center where you can converge them all. And what this also ties into is doing things in a strengths-based way, where you have to look at what is it that you are really good at, and then overlay it with what's happening in the environment to find new opportunities. That's where the dreaming that I talked about kicks in. So that's where, for example, you've seen distilleries flip over to producing hand sanitizer. You've seen uh, clothing manufacturers and fashion designers start making masks in the middle of the lockdown, or PPE, because that's what was needed where they could apply their strengths. And I really believe a lot of people go with, let's just go with strengths, and strengths are critical. What is it you're good at? But I actually know, I believe you've got to tie in what you love. Give you an example. I learned in my first career as a nuclear physicist, I learned I can work with complexity and find my way through complex situations. And I was doing that buried in a lab 7 meters underground, eating radiation. It was interesting, but it wasn't my passion. What I discovered over time, my passion is people. And through a really interesting path of getting involved with organizational change, which is incredibly complex, getting involved with coaching individuals, people are amazingly complex. That's people are my passion. And when you're dealing with personal or organizational change, that brings that complexity skill in. So that allows me to connect my skill with my passion, which is people, what I love to do, and it ties in with what the world's need, because they need to find a way forward, and to pay for it, because that's going to, for organizations, that's going to make them successful, and profitable for individuals. It's going to make them successful, have fulfilled lives, and so on and so forth. So that's a perfect, for me, ikigai. And now it's just a matter of how do I channel it in different ways online versus going to work with people individually, which isn't an option right now. So think about that. If you could identify, really look at what is it that you are good at, what is it your team is good at, what is it that you really love to do, and that your team loves to do. Then start looking at the world in terms of what are the opportunities, where are people hurting right now that you might be able to find an overlap, and then create value, because it's that value will enable you to get paid for it. So think about that, and maybe share some thoughts in. I mean, this is not necessarily a quick thing, but this is where you can start dreaming about the possibilities, to apply that 3D cycle that I use, the Genesis process, about dreaming about where could the overlaps be, and then concretize how do you move it forward. So that to me is the key in terms of the basics, in terms of pivot. Yes, it takes work, absolutely, but those are the basic principles in terms of pivoting your company strategy or your own life in terms of where you want to go. You want to find that overlap, and that's where that dreaming and concretizing those dreams really makes a difference. Now, for those of you who are dealing with all of this change, a couple of things that I wanted to let you know. First of all, in terms, one of the biggest challenges in moving forward with all the stress is we tend to get in our own way. We tend to sabotage ourselves. So I am going to be launching next week a challenge, free challenge, to help you defuse that self-sabotage. And also, one thing I've done with the pandemic to help people move forward is I've taken my Mindfulness 101 program and I've made it available for free. So you can access it, you can download it. Just go to stressmanagementexpert.com and go through, and when you go to the checkout, enter the coupon code COMUNITY, one word, COMUNITY, and you will get full access for free. So please feel free to access this, to pass it on. I just want to make it available right now to everyone who needs it. Have yourselves an amazing day, and we will talk with you soon. And tomorrow I'm going to have Jen White with me to share her journey of being able to start to chart her what's next. See you tomorrow.